so much, Todd. It's an honor and a privilege to get to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Pam. Um, as a prior malpractice defense attorney, I'm always fascinated by the trends that the carriers see. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And we want to take an opportunity to not just talk about sort of the same things that we've previously talked about in terms of lawyer well-being, but also look at specifically how is lawyer well-being tied to risk management and liability from the carrier's perspective, and what can we do about it. So I want to just sort of mention that I think that this is great timing to have this program in December. I'm sure that many of you need your ethics or your well-being CLE credit hour for the year, but I just can't think of a better time to have this program because the weather is cold, school's being canceled for those of us who have kids in school. That's wreaking havoc on an already stressful time. We're doing holiday shopping. There's fewer hours of daylight in the day, and so it's just sort of this perfect storm of things that can get in the way of our well-being. So I want to talk a little bit, remind everybody about the landmark study that the ABA did about lawyer well-being. That was done and findings were issued in 2017. They are working on updating that, but I don't believe that we have the results of that updated report yet. I believe they're still gathering that information. So we are all really anxious to see how things have changed, particularly with a pandemic in there between 2017 and now. But back in 2017, in collaboration with the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation, the ABA Commission on Lawyer Assistance Programs completed national research on lawyer impairment. It looked at about 13,000 practicing lawyers. It covered 15 state bar associations and the two largest counties of one additional state. And never before had that sort of national data been gathered, addressing both substance use and behavioral health concerns in the legal profession simultaneously. And so those results we'll talk a little bit about. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we sort of get the umbrella of what we think this is relevant for in terms of ethics. So standard one of the ABA model rules of professional conduct address competence. And we all know that 1.1 says a lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client, and competent representation requires the legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation reasonably necessary for the representation. What I am happy to see is increased dialogue in the legal profession about the importance of well-being, and that is also an indispensable part of a lawyer's duty of competence. So let's start with defining our terms. Pam, what do we mean when we talk about lawyer well-being?
Well, the ABA task force defines lawyer well-being as a continuous process in which lawyers kind of strive to thrive, right? They want to strive for thriving and success in every dimension of their lives. And they specifically identified six areas. And you know, it's not just lawyers, but this is a process that we all, you know, need to understand and practice in our lives. And the 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 definition includes occupational, uh, your emotional state, social, physical, intellectual, and spiritual. And all of these are areas, dimensions of our lives where we have to strive to have success and well-being. So.
Yeah, and it certainly feels like sometimes with those different plates, I'm spinning one plate and another one is starting to come down, and I got to quickly grab it before it cracks. But
Always.
I love that multi-dimensional definition of well-being. So let's start with poll number one. We want to try to make this as interactive as we can, given that even though we're in a webinar setting. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that get in the way. What are the challenges to our well-being and our trying to strive to thriving? So if you take a minute, answer the poll question. You have to just pick one. What is the single biggest obstacle that you think is in your way of well-being? This is anonymous, so don't worry about that. And then we'll just see. We'll poll the audience and see which ones are our lost leaders. So I'll give you a second to do that. All right, interesting. Interesting. So it looks like tied for first are the 24/7 always on culture and the competing demands of work and family, closely with a third place of difficult clients and or opposing counsel. What do you think of that, Pam?
I can absolutely, my choice would be, having been a working mom for, the last almost 50 years now, would be my first choice would have been competing demands of work and family. But I can see where also the always on culture, I mean, you can't get away. And it's part of our work, right? Emails 24/7. I mean, social media, all of the uh, it, that we're always on, and it's hard to find that downtime and make that time for downtime.
Yeah, yeah. Um, One of the things that I always like to touch on in a wellness presentation is the reminder to have dedicated device-free time. And that can be really hard to do, and we have to maybe be really intentional about it. But it's so important. I feel like we get bombarded by stimuli, and there's so much of our energy that goes to just the distractions of our device, whether it's our desktop or our mobile device. I find that I have it here right now for this presentation, but I find that sometimes it's really helpful just to take my phone and physically put it somewhere else in my house or in my office so that I have to stand up to go get it. And it can't just be that unintentional grab the phone. I have to consciously stand up from what I'm doing and go get it. And that has helped me sort of set some boundaries around devices. We also have a rule in our house of no devices at our dinner table. Fortunately, my kids don't have their own devices yet, but we're starting that rule now early before they get their devices. And ironically, my mom is the biggest one that has to adjust to that when she comes to visit, because she's just not used to it. So our kids remind her that there's no phones at the table, Grammy. But just really trying to be intentional about device-free time is really important. So let's talk a little bit more about the ABA task force and some of their findings. And I want to talk about what they found, and then I want to make sure that we're being really clear that well-being is important for us individually with all of the dimensions that Pam mentioned, and it has a specific and distinct impact on our performance. So I want to make the business case for well-being because, I think some of us feel like well-being can be touchy-feely and woo-woo, and there is a strong business case. There is a strong correlation between how well we are and how effectively we perform. So in terms of the ABA task force, they found that the rates, and this was all self-reported, but lawyers reported chronic stress, high rates of depression and anxiety, high rates of substance abuse, suicidal thoughts during their career, social alienation, work addiction, and sleep deprivation. And again, this study was 2017. I think it's unfortunately going to be even more dire results out of the pandemic. Hopefully, in the increased awareness and the increased promotion of well-being in the legal profession, and the addition by some states requiring specific wellness CLE, maybe we can make some improvement. But I'll be interested to see what the new study shows and what the updates are. And then just another point to make the business case, I came across this great study that two professors out of the University of Pennsylvania did, Allison Brooks and Maurice Schweitzer. They researched the impact of feelings of anxiety on how people performed as negotiators. And they used music to amplify the feelings of anxiety by playing Hitchcock's Psycho for the experimental group and Handel's Water music for the control group. And so they tried to increase the feelings of stress and anxiety in that one group. And then after listening to the music, they had the subjects pair up and engage in a negotiation, a simulated negotiation. And they found, as a result of that study, that those that had listened to Hitchcock's Psycho and had increased anxiety had lower expectations, made lower first offers, responded more quickly to offers, exited the bargaining sooner, and generally got worse outcomes. And so I really want to make the point that, unsurprisingly, lawyer well-being impacts our effectiveness and our performance. And I want to tie this specifically to Pam's experience from a claims perspective. What are some of the largest practice areas that you're seeing out of which claims arise?
Well, our program data pretty much mirrors the ABA's data. Every year, the ABA conducts a claims study with data provided by various insurance companies, the state bar mutuals, the stock companies that have lawyers' professional liability programs. And they examine over 30,000 claims. So they look at a lot of data. And most recently, in 2023, starting with the four big areas of practice which had the highest claims activity were estate, trust, probate, with real estate a very close second, followed by personal injury plaintiff, and then family law. In 2019, just 4 years prior, personal injury plaintiff was the loss leader, followed by family law, real estate, and estate probate in that order. So it's interesting that the new top two, estate probate and real estate, were the bottom two in 4 years ago. But in all of these areas of practice, the stressors that they all have in common are that they're dealing with emotional clients at a difficult time in their lives. I mean, the estates are being disputed. It's the time of the greatest wealth transfer in history, and beneficiaries are arguing with each other. Real estate, it's just real estate's always tough. And then, of course, in personal injury, you have, all of the emotions and sometimes, tragic circumstances that bring the litigation about. So, and then family law goes without saying, that's always emotional.
Do you think that the pandemic is there any research on whether the pandemic influenced claims to the extent of like anything related to scams or fraud or anything? I know there's an increase in terms of real property scams and frauds.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of increase. What we're seeing more and more of are scams, and as a matter of fact, and that's a whole nother, we could do a whole nother program on just on just the scams and how lawyers are victims and targets of the scammers. So yeah, I think the pandemic did initially with in the pandemic, it was kind of like everything kind of slowed down. But now here we are, 5 years later, and there's almost been like a rebound effect where there's been an increase in claims and claims activity. And I think it does come out of the fact that particularly on the real estate side, there's just a lot of scamming going on, and um, a lot of lawyers are falling for it, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, I think the scammers are getting better,
No, they are.
right?
A lot better, a lot better. It's incredible how they can create emails and that look exactly like they're coming from, a Fortune 100 company. I mean, they've gotten really, really good. And I think, unfortunately, I think they're probably using Chat GTP to all of our detriment,
Mhm.
and getting better and better. It's no longer the Nigerian prince scams with all kinds of spelling errors in the content.
So we have these categories of claims, irrespective of the subject matter or the practice area of the claim. What are some of the repeat common causes that you're seeing of claims?
Well, substantive errors like failure to know and properly apply the law always lead the pack. I mean, that's the loss leader, followed by drafting errors and allegations of conflicts of interest. But buried in that data are what I think of as sort of softer errors. And I think that fall into this, particularly this discussion of lawyer well-being. So this, there are errors like failure to react to a calendar or procrastination in performance. And the ABA tracks all of these different causes of claims. Um, Failure to procrastination in performance, procrastination, failure to follow up, improper withdrawal from a matter. And usually it's what we see on the claim side is it's not that it was improper. It's not that they drafted their withdrawal letter or had a withdrawal conversation and didn't say all the right things. It's just that they just disappeared, and there's been a marked increase in these types of claims, I'm sorry, which is really different from all the prior studies. So, this is the first study that's been post-pandemic, and anecdotally, I can say we're seeing a lot more of these claims, and a pattern is emerging of sort of substance abuse as the underlying cause, mental health issues, uh, grief and not handling it well, and divorce are all contributors. And so, you know, these are all sort of reflections of a lack of well-being. Lawyers are not they're abusing substances because they don't, you know, substance abuse is definitely not well-being. It's a sign of that you're not in a state of well-being. Um, Mental health issues, divorce, all of these things are symptoms um, of of lawyers who are handling stress in their lives. They're not handling it is the problem. They're withdrawing. They're abusing drugs and alcohol, and it's we do see an uptick. We are seeing an uptick in claims that ultimately have that as their source.
Hmm. So they're avoiding, they're numbing, they're in a lot of ways just not dealing with it or
Right.
going to something that might mask it or help them feel better temporarily, but doesn't actually address any of the issues that are going on, is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it you can see it in the nature of the claims, and even, the lawyers are, you know, there's programs that the various bar associations all have, and we encourage lawyers to take advantage of all those resources. But for some, it just gets to be a little bit too much, and they check out. I mean, all of these types of claims are a result of the lawyer more or less checking out.
Yeah, and some of those programs that you mentioned, they remind me that um, we want to take care of ourselves, but let's look out for each other too. I certainly don't know all the programs in all the jurisdictions, but in my home jurisdiction of North Carolina, there's a lawyer assistance program where I could anonymously, if I was concerned about a colleague, you know, make a phone call, and they would gently try to help that person out and get them support. And it's completely outside of any sort of regulatory body. So it's completely unattached from our state bar, because the idea is we want to support them and get them help. We're not trying to, get them in trouble or report them. And so, I would just encourage us all that we want to help you all take care of yourselves, but we also want to be looking out for each other as well. Along those lines of interacting with others, you recently shared with me an interesting article that the ABA wrote about sort of, my phraseology is the contrary to the phrase, the good guy always finishes last. This article actually stands for the opposite of that proposition, that no, the good person doesn't always finish last. Tell us a little bit about that article.
Yeah, I think it was interesting, and it kind of, arose out of our discussion about, what kind of um, the importance of honesty, because I am a big believer that you really have to be honest, and you have to be honest in every aspect of your life. And a lot of times when we have problems, the last thing we do is look in the mirror and say, okay, what did I contribute to this problem? But the article was really, really interesting, and it kind of ties back to the six uh, aspects of well-being that we discussed in the very beginning. And what it found was that basically lawyers who were dishonest in their negotiations, dishonest in their dealings with clients, dishonest in their negotiation, overly aggressive in their negotiation, um, had a lot worse outcomes than the lawyers who did not engage in those deceitful practices. They found that deceit decreases cognitive performance. It leads to mental illness. It it tends to foster mistrust of others. And it's scientific. I mean, they did a bunch of studies. I mean, University of Rochester and Michigan State University analyzed dozens of peer-reviewed articles on honesty, and they found that honesty was supremely beneficial to well-being and physical health. That they said it was affiliative, it promotes relationship connections, it creates intimacy and trust in relationships and organizations. And so if you're conversely, dishonesty tends to uh, lead to mistrust. I mean, so people who are dishonest, they don't trust anybody else either, which creates the opposite of intimacy. It creates um, isolation and and increasing isolation, and it damages relationships, and it ruins um, possibilities for intimacy and connection with others. And so um, they also found that the article discussed that there was a 10-year University of Michigan study that found uh, deceptive practices, deception, dishonesty in your choices. Uh, that people who engage in that practice, they have a higher risk of depression than people who don't. Uh, Berkeley and Harvard researchers, they found and concluded that being dishonest is associated with elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, high cortisol levels, which is all related to stress. I mean, it all has a negative impact on your health. It even decreases cognitive performance, and not just in terms of your sort of mental performance, which it absolutely affects, but also even in your physical performance. They did a study of professional athletes, and they found that there was a decline in performance among those athletes who engaged in rule breaking. So in all of these ways, you know, um, being dishonest or practicing being deceitful in your practice is has a huge negative impact on not only your practice because your peers uh, tend to view you they as someone who's untrustworthy. I mean, you get a negative reputation among your peers if you're dishonest or overly aggressive. You get worse outcomes, as Colleen noted earlier, and overall, it also impacts you physically and shortens your lifespan, or at least reduces your quality of life. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of bad stuff.
Well, it's always so fascinating when we find articles or research that support sort of what I was taught sort of growing up, right? And I was like, oh, there's a study for
Yeah.
that. Good. I can, it's not just my mom, because my mom told me.
Exactly. As we said, I come from the generation where it's just like, yeah, well, cry me a river and, put on your big boy and big girl shoes and, go out and fix it instead of being a little more, sympathetic and understanding. But the studies all show that too, be more sympathetic, be more empathetic, be more understanding um, and be more honest about you know, your role in your own life. So,
Yeah, and so we want to talk a little bit more about like what are the things that we can do to help improve our well-being. And one of those Pam already mentioned with, looking in the mirror and seeing how, how did I contribute to this? What have I done to sort of contribute to this? And what can I take responsibility for? So that then I have the insight and awareness around, all right, now what might need to be changed, right? So I always find it interesting, whether it's my coaching clients or my children or whoever it is, that we seem to want a different outcome without doing anything different to achieve that different outcome, and that may just be human nature. But if we want a different result or a different outcome, we need to put a different input in. We need to try something different. And so I love Pam talking about sort of the self-awareness of looking in the mirror and seeing, what have I done to contribute to this? What can I do to change it? I like to think about sort of doing an audit, like a self audit of, how many hours of sleep am I getting? How much time am I spending on social media? How much time of exercise am I getting? So to help us do that, we're gonna do our second poll and just get a sense of the average number of hours of sleep you get per night during the work week. Let's just take the work week. Don't worry about the weekends because I know sometimes those are outliers. Maybe we catch up on sleep on the weekends, but let's just look at the work week. So let's just start with we don't know what we need to change or how to change it until we know where we are. And so I'm curious to see what is the average number of hours of sleep per night that you get during the work week. And let's just see what we can assess from this. Y'all are doing pretty good. I'm impressed. This is really good. 41% of you, 7 hours, 33%, 6 hours, and another 13%, 8 hours. I mean, that's really better than I thought it was going to be. What do you think, Pam?
Me too. Yeah, I always try to get 8 hours. I don't usually make it, but I'd love to be able to get nine. But seeing so many getting seven, and I'll talk about studies. They all show that sleep is critical. It's the time when our bodies rejuvenate and restore, repair. It has profound impacts on our health,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
mental health, but health overall.
Yeah. Yeah, and we often get questions around sort of sleep habits and sleep hygiene when we talk about wellness. And so I want to recommend that there are all sorts of great resources, free resources on the internet. If you just Google healthy sleep habits or sleep hygiene, there's a lot of really good recommendations, not the least of which is to not have any screen time, at least an hour, if not 2 hours before you go to sleep, because it really does like the input into your eyes really does impact your brain and your ability to sort of start the calming down process so that you can fall asleep. A lot of us, myself included, are under the misunderstanding that I can just, buzz around my life and then go straight to bed and fall right asleep. That is not actually how our brains or our bodies are designed. And so there's all sorts of sleep habits and sleep hygienes that help your body start doing the things that help you prepare to get good, restful sleep. Because there's nothing worse than laying in bed, being tired, wanting to go to sleep, and then getting stressed and anxious and irritated about the fact that you can't fall asleep. So the screen time is really important. Trying to go to bed at the same time or around the same time every night is also really important for your body's natural rhythms. I know that is also challenging. And then it's also challenging when our daylight is shorter right now, but getting some amount of sunlight, getting outside, moving your body and getting sunlight, even if it's just walking during the day, actually helps you sleep better and get more restorative sleep at night. So sleep hygiene or sleep habits is a great thing to put in Google, or I guess maybe maybe Chat GPT can tell us more about that. So in terms of sort of looking in the mirror and trying to gain new insights, we talked about doing an audit. And Pam, I know you have an interesting story about a time that you were sort of poo-pooing new insights, but you actually gained some new insights. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, yeah. I've fallen into the category. I'm sure some of you who are, watching this today are kind of like, yeah, I'm not into all that yoga and crystals and whatever. This is all just a lot of hoo-ha and, but I need my CLE, so I'll stick with it for a while. But when I was a kid, my mom would gave me a good piece of advice because I'd come home and I'd complain about a teacher or this or that, and my mom would say, "Look, doesn't matter if you like that teacher or don't like that teacher. Doesn't matter if they're good or not. There's something you can gain. There's something you can learn. There's something good that can come out of it." And which was kind of amazing because my mom was kind of a cup half empty kind of gal, but she was really, really spot on with that. And and so I always took that approach. I mean, I thought, okay, she's right. There's always something I can learn. Well, I once had a partner where in a prior business, and she was all into this strategic coaching kind of program. And so I had to, as her partner, I had to participate. And I went in, I started to go into it in kind of with kind of a um, negative attitude, negative approach. Oh, this is going to be a waste of time. Plus I had to travel and all this stuff. I was going to have to do all this stuff. And then I thought, well, my mom was sitting on my shoulder saying, "Hey, there's something to learn, you can learn it." And it was surprising to me that I did learn. I learned something that really ended up being a practice that I adopted, in my life and wished that I had learned and even thought about sooner. And it was a simple concept about um, people learn or people problem solve differently. And that all of us, we all tend to fall into, one of five different. It's kind of like it's not exactly the Myers-Briggs or the other, that other sort of tests that we're all familiar with, but rather it was a little more generic, and people tend to fall into one of five problem-solving approaches. You have your entrepreneurs who are going to go, 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 you know. Then you have your managers who kind of balance, action with research, and you have your analysts, um, paralysis by analysis, and so on and so forth. So you have all these different uh, problem solving styles. And what we all tend to do is we tend to favor those in our organizations who have the same problem solving styles as we do. So entrepreneurs tend to like other entrepreneurial people because they're fast, boom, 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 boom. And so but to have an effective organization, to have an effective team, you have to have all the different problem-solving skill sets in your team. And so, you know, that was for me anyway, at that point in my life and my career, that was a revelation. It's like because I absolutely tended to favor people who were more like myself. And even introspectively, looking at my family life, I tended to favor those children who were most like me. And it's like, wow, that is just beyond wrong and ineffective. And so I learned something that was really, I think, profoundly affected my life in a positive way out of something that, I was approaching initially as a total negative. So I think we can find that in every aspect of our life. And I think that practice, it takes practice. It takes because it's like anything else. What you got to do 10,000 times before you get good at it. But um, I think that aspect of, saying, okay, well, I'm going to learn something new, even if this is not something I want to do or not something that appeals to me, or even if it's something I just my preconceived notion is it's a waste of time and a waste of energy. I'm still gonna I'm something good is gonna come out of it. And I think uh, it's worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing about sort of the practice piece too, like the implementing it, once you have the awareness, then keeping it alive and implementing it and making sure it doesn't just go away after your weekend retreat or what, coaching seminar or whatever it was, is sort of having an accountability partner, which I suspect your partner probably was for you, right? You all took that information and then applied it and implemented it and kept it alive. And I think that's an important piece of whatever it is that we are trying to implement or change, is to have somebody else, a buddy system, an accountability partner who's on the same page with us to help keep that going, right? Whether it's going for a walk or going to the gym or making healthy eating choices, or bringing a new type of communication style or problem solving into your workplace. It's having buddies who are aligned with the goals to try to help keep you going in that direction.
Absolutely. The other thing is, I think, especially lawyers, I mean, we're all type A personalities, right? I mean, you don't go to law school unless you're somewhat type A, I think, because it's a big commitment. And um, and so just uh, being able to, you know, turn that off for a little bit, and you know, what is it? Slow down and smell the roses. I mean, it really is important, I think, uh, to our overall well-being that we actively practice to, improve our lives and improve our outlook. And in this day and age, I mean, with all the stuff, oh my gosh, that we're bombarded with constantly, on the television and the news. I mean, it's hard to maintain a positive mental attitude. It really is. You have to, as you said earlier, you have to disconnect. You have to just shut it off. And I think it's just so important. So important.
Yeah, and I think being intentional about that time, it may not work for everybody, but I have to sometimes schedule on my calendar, and I my code my code for it when I put it on my calendar is blank space. I have to remind myself to be sure I have blank space. And I've also started just not taking my phone on a walk. And we have two dogs, so I have one leash in each hand, and I can't really juggle the phone anyway. And it's this really nice time of, man, I'm in nature, granted, just in our neighborhood, but I'm, you know, listening to the birds chirp instead of whatever it is on my earbuds or getting distracted by the dinging in the, of the phone. And just sort of being intentional about a 30-minute walk is rejuvenating.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's rejuvenating in a physical way as well. I mean, there's studies that show that particularly if you walk in the morning, early in the morning, the exposure to the low infrared light it penetrates all the way through to your mitochondria. So, I mean, it's very important to get out and get that little bit of fresh air and sunlight.
All right, so let's put poll number 3 up and let's see how you all are doing on exercise. We've been talking about exercise. What is the average number of minutes? Oh, I asked it as minutes and then I did it as hours. How did that happen? I think there may have been a glitch. That was my fault, probably.
Well, why don't we look at it as exercise per week? Because I think that's what that is. Do you get 7 hours a week, 6 hours a week?
Yeah, let's do it per week. Sorry, there was a typo in my poll question.
Yeah, so I didn't catch that either. Sorry about that.
Number of hours of exercise per week.
And they say, I mean, it's not like you need a huge amount of exercise every week. They say, 3 hours is there are benefits from even as little as 3 hours a week.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so a nice even spread. A handful of you don't exercise, don't get very many minutes at all. A good portion of you, 41%, get somewhere between 0 and 4 hours. And then a decent chunk of you get between 4 and 7 hours a week. So that's, averaging out to 30 to 60 minutes a day, which is fantastic. So I actually, notwithstanding the fact that I messed that question up, y'all are doing pretty darn well. So keep up the good work.
Absolutely critical, I think.
So, talk to us a little bit about some other tools that you find to be effective to maintain that well-being, to keep striving for the thriving. I know you mentioned compartmentalizing is one of the tools that you use. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I've always been someone who, and I think it's probably because I grew up in uh, a large family with, I mean, my kids wouldn't even they wouldn't even be able to deal with it. And, there was 5 kids and 900 square foot house in one bathroom. I mean, so it was always crazy, crazy, hectic. Um, and so I learned at a kind of a young age to compartmentalize, to kind of say, okay, well, I'm just gonna um, and some of it's bad. I remember there was a time when it was when we're all supposed to just let our feelings out and all this constantly being advised you gotta let it all out and let it all out and that just was never my cup of tea. I tended to say, okay, well, you know what? This is a real pain in the keister for me right now. I'm just gonna box it up, put it on the shelf, and deal with it later. And it's like, there have not been studies that I've read that say, that's actually a useful a useful way and a good way to deal with some of the stress and particularly the negative things that are going on in your life. It's not that you're just going to ignore them. It's that you're just going to say, you know what? I'm just not going to let that get to me right now. I'm going to put it in a box. I'm going to put it on the shelf. I'll take it off the shelf later when I have time to deal with it. And sometimes, I think that can be a useful tool uh, for lawyers, particularly when you're trying to organize your day and you have clients who are pressing you, you have coworkers who are colleagues who are pressing you, you have, employees who are demanding, and your family that are demanding, all of these people demanding a piece of you. Um, so I think anyway, that's been something that's kind of worked for me. It's like, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna deal with this right now and put everything else off to the side and kind of, you know, check off this to-do list one piece at a time, and not try to solve all of it all at once because it's
Mhm.
just not possible.
Yeah, and I hear a couple things out of that. One, you're conserving your energy, but two, and I think more importantly, it sounds like what I call strategic prioritization, right? You're being intentional and
Mhm.
strategic about your priorities as opposed to reactive or as opposed to, the most demanding client or the most upset or the loudest one gets the attention, right? As opposed to being, you get to choose, you be more in the driver's seat and you strategically prioritize and then focus in on that. I have a former colleague who was so good about that he would put his phone on do not disturb. And so even if like, and then he had a list, and if you were, Colleen was on number 2 and he called me and got my voicemail, and then I called him right back, he was already on to number 3. And so he wouldn't answer my call because he was already on to the next thing. I mean, I laugh about it, but he was ruthless in his prioritization and he stayed on the track that he set instead of letting himself get pulled off course by a knock on the door or the phone ringing. And so I offer that as something to consider, not necessarily to be necessarily as rigid as he was, but it was something that had never occurred to me at the time. I was a younger lawyer and I was like, oh gosh, I can actually not answer the phone if I'm not on the
Yeah.
other line. This is a novel concept. But sort of along the lines of demanding clients, we have a really interesting question in the Q&A. Is there data in any study, which taking a study that is self-reported with a grain of salt, that shows attorneys feel that clients are more demanding, expecting immediate results? Have we taken the human factor out of practicing law? I don't know if there's a study on that, but I think it's a really interesting topic. Do you know if, I mean,
I'm not aware of a study, but it is a theme that runs through uh, almost every lawyer study, a lot, so many articles as well, and that is that, yeah, clients are being a lot more demanding and a lot more assertive and frankly rude. And it's just, and you look at it, everywhere you go. I mean, how can it not be affecting lawyers? How can lawyers' clients not be more demanding and assertive and rude when you see it in every aspect of society today? I mean, it's in the schools, it's in the stores, it's everywhere. So yeah, I think so. And we're also seeing it, again, this is anecdotal, but on the claims side, there seems to be a tactic now where, you come out of the gate and it doesn't matter how, what your actual damages are, but you come out of the gate demanding policy limits and, ridiculous sums of money. In the transaction, the actual damages might be, under $100,000, and people want millions and they won't back down. So yeah, I think there may not be actual studies and data, but anecdotally, and I think anecdotal evidence does count for something. It may not be the what is it, gold standard, controlled studies, but it's uh, it's definitely something that we see in society. And so it absolutely is something we're seeing in the claim side, and it's got to be affecting the lawyers in their daily practice.
Yeah, and I think clients have access to so much more information, not always accurate information, but so much more information than they did 20 years ago, right? They've, even in my mediation practice, I have parties
Oh yeah.
apparently putting into chat GPT questions to ask your mediator. So, like, okay. Um, so I do think that they have more access to information, and then they think they know more than maybe they do, or maybe their conversation with Chat GPT, makes them a Chat GPT JD. Just like we used to joke that, Google MD, Google makes me a
Yeah.
doctor, which I am far from, right? So I think that's a challenging dynamic to navigate, especially if they don't come right out and tell you where they're getting this information from, so that you could,
Right.
gently perhaps disabuse them of a notion. For instance, in North Carolina, our mediation rules are very different from other jurisdictions. So if ChatGPT is pulling from the whole source of information, they may get some really interesting information. And then I think the other thing that's challenging is, how do you set expectations from the very beginning consult, right? Because I really do believe that our clients treat us the way we allow them to treat us. And so if
Absolutely.
we give them our cell phone number, if we tell them to call us anytime, that's what they're going to do. Versus, are we setting expectations about communicating what our typical work hours are, communicating the expected turnaround time for a response to an email or a voicemail? If you're setting the expectations in advance, perhaps that's going to help keep the expectations and the boundaries in place a little bit longer than if you didn't set those expectations. And maybe give yourself a little bit more time than you think you're going to need, right? If you typically respond to voicemails within 24 hours of them being left, maybe tell your clients it's 48, so that you so that you have a buffer. The other thing that I have found incredibly important for me is, when I look at my calendar each day, I try really hard. It doesn't always work, but I try really hard to not schedule back to back to back to back meetings, because inevitably then I don't even have a chance to stand up from my desk. I'm literally, sitting the entire time. And so I think building in micro breaks, even just in the way you manage your calendar, is really important. If a meeting runs long, your next one doesn't start till 15 or 30 minutes later, so you're not racing and you're not feeling behind. So I think that there are ways that we can be intentional about structuring our day and managing expectations with our clients from day one of the interaction that could potentially help with some of that. And then I know there's another question of, could you repeat the types of workers' approaches to problem solving? I think this was when you went to the program with your former partner.
Well, yeah, it's been over 20, it's been almost 30 years since I did it, but yeah, it was there's your entrepreneur who's quick to make a decision. Doesn't need all the information, just quick to make a decision. You have your manager, which is someone who tends to be will make does the research first and then makes the decision. But they're also relatively, quick about it. Then you have your analyst, your make a list, check it twice, kind of decision or problem solver. And then you have your more, I guess it would be like a kinetic type problem solver, more of a hands-on. Um, and then I don't remember what the fifth one was.
I
Um,
wonder if is the I'm curious if there's one that, like, doesn't want to make a decision at all.
Oh yeah,
So,
yes, that's so not so much the analysis by paralysis by analysis, but that's kind of where that one falls in. It's like they never have enough information to make a decision. And so you know, it's and there, you can always wait for more information, but at some point you have to say, all right, most of my information is I got all I'm going to get, and I'm going to make the decision regardless. But we do tend to favor those who solve problems most like ourselves, which is human nature. But you
mhm.
have to fight it if you want to build a team. And I would think you have to fight it if you want to have good well-being in your personal life, because if you tend to favor people who are most like yourself and not others you limit yourself to only people like yourself. How boring is that?
Yeah, yeah, and I think awareness is the key, right? Because
Absolutely.
if we don't even realize how we solve a problem and we just get irritated with somebody else, right? Like
Yeah,
if I'm an entrepreneurial quick to decide, I'm going to be really irritated with the analysis paralysis person
absolutely.
because they're going to be slowing me down and I'm not going to understand. I'm just going to be frustrated. But if I have awareness of these different styles, then I can have some curiosity and some compassion around it instead of just being irritated and having conflict. So I think the
Exactly.
awareness is that key there.
Exactly.
Another on this topic, another great question. Maybe we need to have another CLE on this in particular. Are there any studies that show whether different problem solving styles are better suited for particular areas of law, which probably would
Ooh,
be
that's a
helpful
good
in
question.
managing a lawyer's wellness?
Well, why don't I hop in on that topic right there so that, and I want to come back to this question. So we're going to stay on as a group for those people who want to stick with us. We'll stay another, 5 or 10 minutes. But for those of you who have a hard stop at 2 o'clock in order to get your CLE, I want to make sure that we facilitate and accommodate those folks as well. But anyway, you're right, Colleen. This webinar could easily have gone another hour. So, and I want to thank everybody who attended. Simply put, we don't have webinars without you folks attending. So, we're really happy you took the time and hope you found it to be a good use of your time. And Pam, Colleen, I'll say it now. You know, thanks for bringing your knowledge and guidance and on an important and often overlooked topic. But I think the insights and the passion that you brought makes this kind of session really, really special. And I love the interaction between and back and forth between you two, and it was really, really informative. So thank you. Now, before I sign off and let those of you who want to leave, I want to bring your attention to the fact that you need to fill out the survey. You need to put in the code words, and I'll just remind everybody that the first code word was well. And the second code word was being, so well-being. And I want to also bring your attention to our Q1 webinar next year on the 18th of March about how AI works for legal professionals. The last couple of AI webinars we had here were almost sellouts, so this one's going to be right up there as well. We've got a great speaker. You can find all the information on the AltaPro RPG website, www.altaprorpg.com, and you'll be getting emails from us as well about that one. All right, that's all I have. So if those of you who want to leave, feel free to leave, fill out the survey, and get your CLE, and then we'll hang around and answer that question and others.
Thanks. So let us know if there's any other questions you have. Feel free to put them in the Q&A. I don't know if I don't think Pam's an expert on this problem solving styles thing that she did 20 or 30 years ago, but do you have any insight, Pam, as to whether or not there's specific, I guess, assessments tailored to lawyers or areas of law?
I'm not, no, I'm not familiar with that. Other than, lawyers tend to be, type A personalities who strive, to be the best. I mean, it's kind of, um, but you can have any one of these problem-solving styles and still be, a type A personality um, who's striving to be successful. So um, I think the main key is as you point out, is to value all the different problem-solving styles and to build uh, respect and appreciation for the different ways people solve problems, and then your team is going to be far more effective that way. I have to remind myself from time to time, everybody, a B plus is pretty good. If you have a B plus players on your team, that's pretty good. You can't have all A players. I mean, it's not feasible. It's not realistic. So, and it's wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, your folks who maybe aren't as um, let's say driven might be more creative. And sometimes, I mean, I'm amazed where some of the ideas can come from that make, our work better. I mean, make our work product better, make our processes better.